London, the capital of England, but also home to some of the most powerful, violent crime syndicates in the UK. London's crime families were traditionally centred in the East End of London. The infamous Cray twins being the most notable, they were identical twins and organised crime figures who operated in the 50s and 60s. With their gang, known as the Firm, the Cray twins were involved in murder, armed robbery, arson, protection rackets, gambling, and of course assaults. At their peak in the 1960s, they gained a certain measure of celebrity status by mixing with prominent members of London society. But on the 8th of May 1968, things came to a head when the twins were arrested and charged with the two murders of George Cornell and Jack the Hat McVitie. Leonard Reed, or better known as Nipper Reed, arrested both the twins in May 1968 after trailing the brothers for years. In 1969, both Ron and Reggie were sentenced to life in prison. It had such a huge impact in the underworld that people felt the tide was turning against the gangsters. Around the same time as the Cray twins was an outfit from South London known as the Richardson Gang, also known as the Torture Gang. They had a reputation as some of London's most sadistic gangsters. Their alleged specialities included pulling teeth out using pliers, cutting off toes using bolt cutters, and nailing victims to floors using 6-inch nails. Although both gangs were each side of the Thames, they felt they were in direct competition, and a turf war began. An important member of the Richardson Gang was George Cornell. He was originally a member of the East End gang called the Watney Streeters, and later became involved in the Cray twins, although in 1964 changed sides and aligned himself with the Richardson Gang. Another prominent figure of the Richardson Gang was Mad Frankie Fraser. He began his criminal career at the age of 13 and had spent over 40 years in prison. He was an enforcer for the gang, and reportedly his favourite brand of punishment was extracting teeth with pliers. But on the 30th of July 1966, which was actually the last day of the World Cup, the infamous torture trial began, and it was the downfall of the Richardson Gang. The head of the crime group, Charlie Richardson, was sentenced to 25 years. Younger brother Eddie got a 10 stretch, and it felt it was an end of an era with both the Crays and the Richardsons off the streets. The 1970s saw a new family emerge, the Clerkenwell Syndicate, also known as the Addams Family, or simply known as the A-Team. Terry, Tommy and Patrick were brothers who were born to Irish parents and part of a large family of 11 children who grew up in Barnsbury, Islington. Allegedly one of the most powerful crime organisations in the UK, they've been credited with a wealth of over £200 million. Terry Adams, also known as the Godfather, and his gang have been allegedly involved in drug trafficking, extortion and hijacking gold bullion. They've also been linked to over 25 gangland murders of informants and rival criminals. Their tentacles reached so far that it was said that they had connections in the Metropolitan Police and also had a Conservative MP in their pocket. In July 1991, Mad Frankie Fraser, the enforcer for the Richardson Gang, was shot. It was widely believed that the Addams family had ordered the hit, but in his autobiography he claimed it was just rogue police. In 2010, 38-year-old Stephen Marshall claimed he was the nephew of Terry Adams. He was convicted in a case known as the Jigsaw murder and revealed that he disposed of 4 bodies for the Adams family and was sentenced to 36 years in prison. The Adams family had their enemies tortured until their limbs fell off. They also extorted businesses for thousands of pounds, and allegedly they even had someone buried in the concrete underneath the Millennium Dome. Notoriously violent, the A-Team's signature hit was a 2-up in which a gunman rode pillion on a motorcycle. One insider claimed that if you're doing a job and you had the Addams family behind you, even just the name meant that no one was going to mess around with you. Everyone knew that they were going to get paid, and everything went as smoothly as possible. One of the A-Team's main enforcers was Gilbert Winter, who's been missing since 1998. It's alleged that in 1994 he had murdered a drug dealer, Claude Molesley, with a samurai sword in punishment for stealing from the family. Although he went to court for murder, the case was dropped as a key witness refused to give evidence. But only 4 years later, on the 8th of March 1998, he left his home that he shared with his girlfriend and was never seen again. It's believed that vanity cost the gangland enforcer his life. It was raining heavily that evening, and Winter was anxious not to get his expensive suit wet. He borrowed an umbrella and was still protecting himself from the rain as he got into the van backwards, not seeing the men who were there to kill him. By that time, it was too late. A source claimed that if he hadn't worried about his suit, he would have seen who was inside the van and realised what was up. The source also claimed that he won't be seen again. And it's now believed that Winter is the one that's buried underneath the Millennium Dome. But after decades of success and a sense of being near untouchable, by the turn of the century, it seemed the Addams brothers had peaked and law enforcement closed in. Now, although they were running a crime organisation, the taxman felt he never got his cut. In February 2007, he received a jail sentence of 7 years. He was also ordered to pay £4.8 million in legal fees to 3 law firms who previously represented him. 7 years later, he was ordered to pay another £650,000 under the Proceeds of Crime Act. In 2016, Patsy Adams was jailed for 9 years for shooting Paul Tiernan, who was once a member of their inner circle. He shot him in the chest near his home in Clerkenwell before fleeing. He believed he was a grass. In 2017, Second-in-Command Tommy Adams was sentenced to 7 years in prison for money laundering. He was then hit with a bill of £1.2 million, and if he didn't pay it, he had to serve a further 7 years. All 3 brothers have claimed that they left their criminal past behind them in the 1980s and have led a legitimate life, and it's just a witch hunt by the Metropolitan Police. If you've got this far and you like this video, please do give it a like and feel free to drop me a comment. I do try to reply to all comments, and if you haven't already, please don't forget to subscribe. David Hunt, also known as a long fella in the inner circles due to his 6'5" height, is a suspected organised crime boss linked to violence, fraud, prostitution, money laundering and murder. It's believed he heads a gang dubbed the Hunt Syndicate or the Canning Town Cartel. Hunt has been described by the Metropolitan Police as too big to bring down. It's been stated by the police that the syndicate has managed to evade prosecution with the help of corrupt police officers and intimidating witnesses. Hunt was born in 1961 in a cramped council house in East London. He's the youngest of 13 children. After leaving school at 16, he became an amateur boxer and quickly earned a reputation as a ferocious fighter. In the 1980s, it was claimed that Hunt had joined a gang called the Snipers, who were involved in lorry hijackings in Essex and East London. Their reputation for violent crime meant that some were called on to act as muscle for more established criminals. Hunt was ambitious. A police report in 1985 noted how he was moving up the ladder and overseeing the crimes the gang had carried out. It was also claimed that Hunt had put a £1 million contract out on 3 police officers. Hunt summoned Yardie hitman Carl the Dread Robinson to a boat in Marbella and instructed him to kill the officers. But despite detectives being tipped off that there was a contract out against their lives, their superiors, instead of investigating this, suspended the 3 police officers and investigated them for corruption. They were later cleared of any wrongdoing. To this day, one of the police officers still lives under police protection around the clock. He became a close friend and associate of Reggie Cray after visiting him in prison in 2000, just prior to his death. However, Hunt himself would go on to say that the visits had nothing to do with his criminal activity and he only visited Cray a couple of times. For 3 decades, David Hunt has revelled in the reputation of the untouchable boss of an organised crime gang. On the streets of East London, this imposing figure and his muscle-bound henchmen command a nervous respect from all they meet. Hunt's penchant for enforcing his will of acts of extreme violence has helped ensure no one stands up to him. Even the police fear that this villain, who makes money through fraud, prostitution and money laundering, is simply too big to bring down. Bakir Arif, also known as a Duke, is one of 7 brothers in a crime family known as the Arifs. They came to prominence in the 1960s after the Krays and the Richardsons had been sent down, and they've been active ever since. The crime family, who's led by the Duke, took over from the Krays and the Richardsons to be the #1 crime family in the UK. They are Turkish Cypriot origin and have been operating in southeast London since the 60s. The brothers have been involved in racketeering, drug smuggling, armed robbery and murder. In 1999, the Duke was convicted of conspiracy to supply 100 kilos of heroin worth £12.5 million. He was sentenced to 23 years in prison. The family were linked to international arms deals, violent robberies and drugs. This is Mehmet Arif, and along with his brother Dennis Arif, they were caught during an armed robbery in Woodhatch in Surrey. This is the blood-soaked bulletproof vest worn by Mehmet during the Securico robbery. Shortly after, this is the arsenal that was found at the house shared by Mehmet and Dennis. Dennis and Mehmet had built up a reputation as serious armed robbers in the 1980s, hitting Securico vans across the southeast of England. Although it feels like the brothers have quietened down a bit, it still feels that they're very active in South London. A police officer who had said he spent half his lifetime on the case of the Arifs claimed that they're one of the most awesome gangs and villains ever seen in London. Well, first I would like to say thank you very much for watching. I do hope you enjoyed this video, and until next time, stay safe.